Live and presented by Go Chevrolet every single day here on this Wednesday edition as we were talking recruiting in hour one. Appreciate Chris Reed for stopping by, talking some LSU baseball as the Tigers are setting off to Eugene, Oregon for their spot in the regional over there with Gonzaga will be the opening game as they're heading to the Oregon regional out in Eugene. LSU will play 9 p.m. on Friday night here on Central Standard Time. We were also talking recruiting in hour one, and things are getting wild as far as recruiting goes because things are getting back to normal. Yesterday was the lifting of the dead period in college football, which means that schools and coaches were able to reach out and contact recruits. Recruits were able to get on campus to schools. LSU had 15 high-quality prospects on their campus this past weekend. Everybody trying to get a visit from Arch Manning, as this will be the summer that Manning really kind of gets out and sees some schools. He'll be traveling for the entire month of June, stopping in on college campuses, going to football camps, and as expected, this Arch Manning recruitment is going to interest and intrigue everybody. Jeff Duncan, who is a good friend of our show, who is over at The Athletic, has a fascinating, in-depth write-up on where the recruitment stands as of today, a lot of the players within that recruitment, a lot of the people who are the gatekeepers. There seems to be one gatekeeper, but some of the guys and some of the people around Arch and helping make that decision. I would advise you to subscribe to The Athletic, and your first stop would be to Jeff Duncan's piece on Arch Manning titled "The Courting of Arch Manning," with a quote from Manning saying, "I'm wide open going into this summer." Jeff is here with us this morning, talking a little bit about that and everything. As always, as we'd like to dive into the city of New Orleans, as he is a great historian and a great resource for us as he joins us here on this Wednesday morning. Jeff, good morning. How are you?
Doing great, Jordy. Hard to be doing bad these days. A lot of good things to be looking forward to.
Amen. Amen. A sunshiny summer day in South Louisiana that looks like things getting back to normal around college football and live music starting to happen within the city. I was in the French Quarter over the weekend and just could not get over the amount of traffic, both foot and cars, bikes, everybody just moving around. It feels like the city is getting back to normal. One of the big players within the city in high school football is obviously Newman High School. They are very used to success as they have seen many players come and go, but it looks like they've got one that may be uncomparable when you talk about Arch Manning. Within the city, what is the feeling and the feels around Arch Manning as he enters his junior year?
Well, obviously the Manning name alone, Jordy, brings such star power to Arch. I mean, everyone in uptown New Orleans, a very close-knit, insular community, and everyone has known about Arch Manning since his grade school days. I mean, he's one of these kids that was dominating in the little leagues and soccer fields in the 5th and 6th grade. You know, his athletic prowess is well known. So everyone was anticipating what that would translate to once he got to Newman and started playing football. He showed, innate leadership skills at a young age, and he's carried that over to Newman. So he really, the off-field intangibles that you expect with the Mannings are there. His study habits, all these things, the intelligence level. So it was just a matter of what's he going to develop physically, and he has sprouted up here in the last year and a half or so to about, I think he's about 6'3.5", 6'4", over 200 pounds. He's been weight training with a personal trainer. So that has come along as well. And when you can converge the physical and mental skills with all of the natural resources that he can call on by being the nephew and grandson and son of football royalty. I mean, it's really just a complete package. And I don't think we've ever seen a quarterback come along with all of this in one package. That there's no one that can call on the lineage of Archie Manning, Peyton Manning, Eli Manning in really college football history.
Do you remember the first time you saw him, and what was your impressions? What are your impressions of a young Arch Manning?
Yeah, I really do. I went to a bunch of games his freshman year, and the thing that strikes you when you watch him play right away is he's very athletic. He has got Cooper's genes in him. Obviously, his father was a tremendous wide receiver, signed with Ole Miss as a receiver, could dunk a basketball backwards. I mean, very athletic, very much like his grandfather. I mean, old school people will remember Archie was a tremendous athlete, great scrambler and runner. That is what strikes you when you watch Arch. I mean, he's not like Peyton and Eli, who was more of a pocket quarterback, stationary guy. Arch can get around, move outside the pocket. He's more the modern quarterback that we see today. And then he's got a tremendous arm and is just so poised, much like Eli. Doesn't show hardly any emotion on the field. Very advanced in that way, in command of the offense. Really, just looks like a can't-miss prospect, Jordy. I mean, you never know what's going to happen, but
Sure.
It's hard to find fault in any part of his game.
How crazy is his recruiting? You have a great back and forth with Nelson Stewart, who is his head football coach down there at Newman. And Stewart has seen a lot of guys come and go, Odell Beckham, Eli, just to name a few. And they got current players on this roster that are being recruited at a high level. How different is Arch's recruitment in talking to Coach Stewart?
Well, obviously it's much different than Eli and Peyton, who came out before the advent of social media. Their recruitments were not anywhere near as hyperbolic as this one is going to be in the 24/7 world that we have of coverage now in college football and high school recruiting. What's different, I think, also about Arch's situation is that the family has anticipated this and has very much managed the process. There are basically rules of engagement with the coaches that are recruiting Arch. I mean, they know the Manning name, obviously, and have great respect for that family. So they know it's a different recruitment, and no one is stepping outside the lines that have been set forth by the family and by Coach Stewart. So I think it's been managed about as well as it can be. But here's the thing, Jordy, that I think makes this such a unique situation. The two kind of legacy programs, if you will, Tennessee and Ole Miss, both of which, got Eli and Peyton Manning. Both those programs have what I would consider to be uphill climbs in getting Arch Manning. And that Tennessee obviously has hit hard times. They've turned over a bunch of coaches. They really haven't been relevant in the SEC East in a long time. And Ole Miss also, because of the NCAA probation, they've been rebuilding, haven't really been a factor in the SEC West. So I think it really opens up his recruitment to everyone involved. Now, having said that, they're pretty far along. I mean, coaches have been talking to Arch for months now. And I think you can see, if you read the story, there's about 12, maybe 15, but probably more like 12 schools involved. And when he says he's wide open, he means that. In other words, of that group of 12 to 15, he's considering them all, and really there is no favorite. So he's wide open in that regard, and I think that's what's made this thing interesting is there is no lean. Even LSU, who I think he's very interested in and is right down the road and has two commitments from his teammates, I think is considered just one of the mix because we know the history of the Mannings with LSU, and I think other coaches know that and see this as a wide open recruitment.
Yeah, A.J. Johnson, the wide receiver, and Bo Bordelon, the offensive lineman, are two commits to LSU and very close to Arch Manning as far as friendships go. Not only are they teammates, but they're friends as well. One of the lines in the story that jumps out is the impact that Joe Brady made on Arch just 2 years ago, and that Ed Orgeron has handled Arch's recruitment from day one. What's the feeling that you get around LSU and where they stand, and just how smart of a guy was Brady in seeming like in talking to Arch and his crew on the impact that Brady was able to make in just a very short window in discussions of recruitment during that time period?
Well, I think it says all you need to know about LSU's dedication and importance that they placed on Arch's recruitment, and that in the opening scene of the story, goes back to summer of 2019, but this was before Arch Manning was even a freshman at Newman. He had yet to really play a game as the quarterback. He was at a 7-on-7 camp out at the Ponderosa, LSU's practice facility, and they had the entire offensive staff out on the field talking to the Manning family, basically a welcome wagon, letting them know how much it meant for Arch to be there. This was not a high-profile camp per se. There weren't a ton of elite prospects at it, but everyone knew that Arch Manning was there. And this was, again, before his freshman year he'd ever thrown a pass in a game. I think that tells you all you need to know about what Ed Orgeron thought of this commitment, this recruitment, and Arch Manning. And Joe Brady was front and center there talking ball with Archie and Cooper, letting them know they were going to be a factor in his recruitment and really wanted him. So, and it hasn't slowed down since then. I mean, Ed Orgeron went to Newman School a week after they won the national championship on a recruiting visit, and the purpose of that was to have a, quote, bump in. As you know, it's illegal to have gone there to see Arch. Yep. But we all know what happened there. He made a point to come there and run into Arch Manning so he could be the first coach to shake his hand. That was his freshman year. So we can see the pattern of LSU and their commitment, and I think they've got a great shot. Everything I've heard is they've done a remarkable job of building a relationship with Arch and Cooper, Ed Orgeron, Jake Peets, DJ Mangus. The entire offensive staff has worked this hard, and if they do not get Arch Manning, it won't be because they did something wrong in recruiting him, because they are doing a tremendous job.
With the ties to Joe Brady and LSU bringing back, like you mentioned, DJ Mangus and Jake Peets, do you think that LSU can still rely on Joe Brady as almost like a person to kind of swing LSU as in favor of Arch? Can they still rely on his ear?
Well, I think it had something to do with obviously why those two were hired. I mean, the connections to Joe Brady and trying to resurrect the offense and attract other quarterbacks, whether it's Arch Manning or not. Obviously, he's the Moby Dick you're trying to bring in, but I think more importantly, how this offense performs this season is going to go a long way in determining if LSU is in, say, the final three or so among the finalists for Arch Manning. He's going to be watching everything they do this season offensively. I can tell you the Manning family, using their NFL contacts and networks, they are leveraging that. They're talking to NFL offensive coordinators to find out how well the quarterbacks that come out of certain colleges on Arch's list are prepared by the time they get to the NFL. I mean, that's how in-depth and thorough they are taking this. So no stone's going to be unturned. And just like LSU is going to be, I think, under pressure, I say under pressure, there's going to be a lot of the evaluation in their offense this year. Same thing at Texas with Steve Sarkisian coming in there. They're going to be watching Texas's program to see how they perform offensively, because they're going to want to go somewhere that's going to provide him the best possible vehicle to make it to the next level. There's no question that's a huge part of their evaluation process.
You have great access to the Mannings, and you have in the write-up that Arch spent a weekend in Denver with Peyton learning how to break down film. How much in your in your suggestion do you think that Peyton will have an influence on this? And have you ever watched film with Peyton? And if you have, what is that process like?
Yeah, I've not done that, Jordy. It would be a blast to do. I've done it with Drew Brees for the book that I wrote, and it's amazing. I'm sure it's very similar to what Peyton does. The attention to detail and the thoroughness and evaluation of the defense is mind-boggling, frankly. It blew my mind just how thorough those guys are at that level. As far as influence, I don't think it's going to be as much as people think. The way I look at it is, I think the influence will be this way. They're not going to allow Arch to make a bad choice, but they will not influence his final choice, if that makes any sense to you. Yes. They're not going to let him go somewhere that they don't think is a good spot, but I don't see any bad choices in his final list of 12 or 15 schools. They all look like you could make a case for any of them to be good landing spots. And a kid of this level, I personally believe he's similar to like a one-and-done elite basketball recruit, in that he could probably go just about anywhere and he's going to be successful at getting to the next level. I mean, that's how talented I think he is. So, in other words, if he picked Virginia, I think at a school that good, even though it's not a traditional blue blood in football, I think he'd still be good enough to get to the next level and be successful. But trust me, they're going to evaluate every part of every program, offensive coordinators, offensive systems, in making that decision. And there'll be a lot of input from guys like Peyton because of their connections. And it'll be a resource and a sounding board for young Arch.
I know you mentioned in the story, or he mentions in the story, that he'd like to have his decision made by this time next season so he can go through his senior year with just some calm and some relative quietness. So in that being the goal for him, doesn't that make this summer probably the pivotal summer? Doesn't that mean that this summer is probably the one that'll ultimately make the choice of his experience that he's about to embark on?
Well, I think this summer for the schools this month, I mean, he's going to be going to Clemson here in a few days to camp there, but he's going to schools here in this month that he's not familiar with. He knows LSU. He knows Ole Miss. He's been on those campuses multiple times. So this is kind of a fact-finding mission for him and his family to visit the schools he doesn't have experience with. He hasn't seen and stepped foot on, and meet the coaches that he hasn't met. So I understand that's part of the process. But then I think this fall is going to be very important too, because they're going to try and get out. Like, he plays most of his games on Friday night. They're going to try and get out. They have the means through private charters to get to schools very easily on a Saturday and see what it's like on campus for game days, what the atmosphere is like at games at these schools, and what the environment is like on campus. I think that's going to be as important as this next month. And I would say by the end of his season, he's going to be ready to make a decision. It might last a few months later, but I don't think he's going to draw it out. I think one of these schools is going to start popping out to him for whatever reason, and I think he's going to pull the trigger just to end, the process, because it is going to get really intense, I think, after a long year of recruiting.
It will make for a great Manning passing academy in just over a month down in Thibodeau. I guess you anticipate like every season, the who's who, but without it being there last year and maybe the touch of Arch being around, there should be major buzz around the academy this season.
Oh, no question. And also let's throw in the fact that they missed the camp a year ago because of the pandemic. It's the 25th anniversary.
Wow.
I know the Mannings, I think, are having a documentary filmed. So there'll be cameras there every day. No doubt about it. This is going to be one of the more anticipated camps we've seen in that prestigious academy's history. And they've really turned that into an event down there. Yeah. It's certainly different than the first few ones I covered when it was all the way over in Hammond. It's now become a prestigious kind of must-do in the middle of summer for everyone in the local media here. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how the players compete against each other, too, when they have those skills competitions. That's always fun.
Last one, Jeff Duncan from The Athletic, who's got a very busy morning, totally off topic. Jeff, should I be as annoyed as I am watching the Memphis Grizzlies in the playoffs and expecting that's where the Pelicans should be?
Yeah, I think it's a good point, Jordy. Those two programs kind of mirrored each other, right? You had a elite player taken 2 years ago, John Morant, number 2, Zion, number 1, and the fact that Memphis has been able to build around Ja with really probably less resources than New Orleans has, I think should be disturbing and disappointing to Pelicans fans. And certainly, I think if you're a Grizzlies fan, you have to feel very optimistic about how things are going. Their young general manager, Zach Kleeman, has done a tremendous job there. And David Griffin knows that last season was unacceptable, and there's a lot of pressure on him and everyone else in that front office and the coaching staff to get this ship righted this year. A ton of pressure coming from the top, and it'd be a surprise if they do not make the playoffs next year. But next few months, huge for this organization to get it right, to bring the players in around Zion Williamson, to give him and his group confidence that this organization is headed in the right direction. It's a massive next 2 months for David Griffin.
Jeff Duncan is a must-follow on Twitter and on social media. He is at Jeff Duncan _ is also worth a subscription to The Athletic to keep up with the inside information that he can give you, whether it be on the Saints, the Pelicans, or stories like this on the recruitment of Arch Manning, which is a must-read, a great in-depth write-up on the number one quarterback in the 2023 recruiting cycle, who's got the last name of Manning and resides in New Orleans, Louisiana. Thank you, Jeffrey, as always. Enjoy the rest of the day.
All right, Jordy. Take care, buddy.
Yes, sir. See you, man. There is Jeff Duncan checking in from New Orleans this morning in what is a great write-up. Lloyd and I read it this morning before we went on the air. There are quotes from Nelson Stewart, who is the Newman head football coach. There are quotes from Cooper Manning. There are quotes from Arch Manning. And there is insight on all the schools that seem relevant. And this is the pivot point for Arch Manning's recruitment right here in a couple of days.
How does he keep his head?
He's got a great team around him. If you read the article, you can see the gate that has been built around Manning, and it is very rare that anything touches him. He's not on social media.
Okay.
He's not on Twitter. He runs an Instagram. He has an Instagram account that is private that he manages just for really friends and family. And then there is there's a window of time each day that they allot for college coaches to call, and Nelson Stewart, who's the head coach at Newman, is overseeing and scheduling that. Now, Stewart said that he had to buy another cell phone. I mean, he had to get a totally different cell phone and hand it out just one direct number of how this is, call me if you need to get in touch with anything concerning Arch. And they've got Zoom calls set up for lunch periods, and then the longer Zoom calls go on at his house in the evenings. But he's talked to everybody, and he's had in-depth conversations with everybody. He is obviously enjoying this process here on the front end, but it looks like it could get very old very quick.
I wouldn't enjoy that. That just seems awful.
Well, just the beginning of it would be, just because you're in demand and people want your time and people want to talk to you, and you're talking about fielding calls from Dabo Sweeney and Nick Saban and Kirby Smart and Ed Orgeron. I mean, the who's who of college football.
You have to be on all the time. How long do you think that lasts for him? When he gets to college, he's not going to have the same oversight that he has right now in terms of people being able to handle these sorts of obligations for him.
Oh, I think that there will be a built-in team on his college campus. There will be certain members of the sports information department that are probably just assigned to Arch.
Yeah, but you don't have to listen to them like you listen to family.
Oh, you're talking about his consult?
I'm talking about when he's gonna at one point he's almost like a homeschool kid. It feels like, in terms of like
sheltered.
Yes, he's so sheltered, and when he gets on campus, dude, there's a chance that he's like, I kind of get a chance to breathe here for a second. So I'm wondering if that's even an opportunity at all for the family that they should be concerned about.
It's a good point. I don't know, and there's no reference to that inside of the write-up. In just speaking with a couple of people that I know close to the situation or close around Arch, Randy Livingston, his high school basketball coach, he's very much a normal kid, is what you can take away from it.
That's what I'm saying. So he's going to want to go do stuff.
Yeah, but I think he already does.
Okay.
I think that, he's a New Orleans kid.
He's out.
Right? I mean, just by the environment and just by the climate of the culture there in New Orleans, he's been out and experienced some stuff. I mean, the stories of Eli Cooper and Peyton are
get after it.
Absolutely. I mean, there are tales as long as days of party stories of those guys coming out when they're that same age. Now, no social media, no recognition of the national prominence that Arch is already experiencing as a sophomore in high school. But I think that the closer you talk to people around him, the very much you learn that he is a normal kid. You know what I mean? He just has he's got a very,
just a very close-knit family, and
he's got a very highlighted skill set to play quarterback.